I'm going to be teaching from Luke chapter number 13 today. So you can go ahead and make your way to Luke chapter 13. If you don't have a Bible, maybe you're just new to faith or new to the Bible altogether, it's going to be on the screens, so we'll be able to read it together. But as you're turning there, we're in a season here at Ramp Church where we're not in a specific teaching chapter, so each of our speaking team are just bringing different one-off messages. So we just finished a chapter that was inviting us into this beautiful faith journey of believing God for big things that we feel like He's promised us. And that concluded with our 7-year birthday celebration here at Ramp Church, and also an opportunity for us to give for the first time ever into a building campaign. So that was a couple weeks ago, and I'm thrilled about that. If you've not heard anything about that, there's a building a home booth at the back. I encourage you to pick up a brochure. You can take that home with you. But now we're in a season before we start our next teaching chapter, where we're teaching different things that we feel like the Lord is leading us to. And so this week, I'm going to speak on something that I revisit every few years at Ramp Church. And it's a very practical message on relationships. Yeah, so thank you, Becky. Not only are we starting a new season of communities here, which are our house churches or our home groups here at Ramp Church. If you've yet to get plugged in there, that is where you take what God is saying and doing in us in a corporate gathering, and you walk it out in your everyday life with others. It's the space where you're seen and championed and challenged, heard, and your spiritual gifts have a chance to be in operation there as you hear words of knowledge or wisdom for other people from the Lord. But one of the things I've discovered that when you lean into doing life with others, you realize often, maybe I'm just speaking about myself, how ill-equipped you feel to do relationships well. I'm amazed at how often Paul talks about relationships in the New Testament. And he rarely focuses on what seems to be a prerequisite for doing relationships well, and that's the whole concept that we should be doing relationships. He seems to take for granted that we're living life together. Otherwise, he wouldn't be teaching people how to get on well and how to deal with conflict and what it means to share in common our resources and to spur one another on to good works and to love well. And I feel like we live in a day, in a culture, in a time where that is especially challenging. And so the beautiful thing is I feel like the biblical story, the biblical witness, has some incredible things to tell us about that. And so I want to read a parable that, if you've been a part of Ramp Church for a few years, you've heard me reference this before, but for some of you, this is going to be brand new. It's quite an obscure parable. I really have never heard it taught on before. So Luke chapter 13, I'm just going to read 4 verses, verses 6 through 9. And this is what it says. Jesus says this. Jesus told this parable. A man had a fig tree that was planted in his vineyard. He came looking for fruit on it and found none. Have you ever felt that way about your life? Maybe you come to your life one day, maybe it was this morning. That's why you came to church. And you looked at your life and you were looking for the evidence of fruitfulness, growth, transformation, health, well-being, and found none. Jesus is speaking into this dynamic, and he says this. He told the vineyard worker, listen, for 3 years I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree and haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it even waste the soil? Why should I even be trying? It seems fruitless. But the vineyard worker replied, Sir, leave it this year also, until I dig around it and fertilize it. Perhaps it will produce fruit next year. But if not, then you can cut it down. Many of us are working for fruitfulness in our life or hoping for fruitfulness in our life. and we get discouraged because we don't see any. Maybe it can be fruitfulness in relationships. You've given it a go before. Doesn't seem to be creating much traction. You haven't signed up for communities at Ramp Church, not because you don't like the concept, but because I've been there. I've done that, and it wasn't fruitful. Maybe for you, it's in the work world. And at one point, you had a passion for career advancement, to try new things, to become better at what you're doing. And over time, you recognized, well, it never seems to lead to promotion or bigger paychecks or opportunities or having more freedom to do the things that I'm really passionate about. So now I'm just mailing it in. I'm in cruise control, and I just do what's expected of me. I survive, and I live for the weekends, hoping for a great film to be in cinemas. Where is the area of fruitfulness, perhaps, that you've given up on? And where's an area that this parable could be insightful for you to maybe, instead of trying to change the fruit, maybe you try to cultivate the soil. I love the way one of my friends, Andy Elms, he says, you've never walked by an apple tree or a pear tree and you hear striving noises before fruit is produced. Like, and then an apple pops out. And I think sometimes in our faith life, we take that approach. We feel like if we really want to produce fruit in our life, the solution is to try harder. Or sometimes we even make it really spiritual, so we'll yell at the fruit. In Jesus' name, produce fruit. Or we sing louder songs. When often it's not the fruit that needs adjustment, it's the soil. And here's what I've learned about life. One of your most important life decisions is where you're planted. One of your most important life decisions is where you're planted. And when you're planted in a place that is primed for flourishing, fruit is a byproduct. Fruit's a byproduct of the right tree being planted in the right place. And what God's designed for you to do will be a byproduct of being planted in the right place. I've actually discovered that you cannot sustain fruitfulness without addressing the soil of your life. If you've never thought intentionally about where am I planted? What is the soil around my life, under my life? Then I would encourage you to do so, and I think it would unlock some keys for you. And today we're going to talk about part of that soil. Psalms 92, verses 12 through 14 says it like this: the righteous thrive like a palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Have you ever described your life that way? Someone's like, so how you doing? I'm thriving. I mean, if you looked up flourishing in the dictionary, my face would be next to that word. I'm just flourishing in life. I mean, the psalmist they were so amazed at their own fruitfulness that they're describing themselves as thriving. And they're not detaching it from the place they're planted. Verse 13 says this: planted in the house of the Lord, they thrive in the courts of our God. And then he says, even in situations where maybe people would not expect fruit, they still bear fruit in old age, healthy and green. There's a promise of fruitfulness for your life and for my life. And if you're wondering what church is about, it's far more than just ticking a box at the end of your week. This is what Ramp Church is about. It's about saturating your life in what is essential for your life, growth, and purpose. That is what Ramp Church is about. Our vision for Ramp Church is that it is a hothouse. It's a greenhouse. And you could actually live in a place where maybe your biological family, your family of origin, your nuclear family, or your workplace, could be harmful to you, and you're connected to a faith family that is so primed for your flourishing and your well-being that you can then be equipped and nourished to then impact the mission field that God's called you to be a part of. So everything you do at Ramp Church has purpose. And can I just tell you, it's bigger than just showing up. It's bigger than your attendance. Everything you do at Ramp Church has a purpose. It's bigger than just showing up. And today, I want to talk about one aspect of your purpose here. See, Ramp Church is about increasing your spiritual temperature. I'm not going to teach on that today. It's also about living a life on purpose for the sake of your friends and your family and your city. But today I'm going to talk about how a purpose of Ramp Church is about forming your life in community, forming your life in relationships. So today I'm going to talk about 5 relationships you need to thrive. 5 relationships you need in your life to thrive. And my desire is that you leave today with understanding on what are the relationships I need to pursue or cultivate, but also some understanding on who you need to be in relationships to others. And it's going to be a bit of a playbook. This message is more Proverbs and less Psalms. So you're going to leave with some wisdom, I hope. And then in between the wisdom, maybe I'll share some of my thoughts. So 5 relationships you need to thrive. Let's start. I just want to show you this quick verse from Genesis chapter 2 that I'm sure you've seen before. God had just created the perfect place for humanity to thrive. We see in Genesis chapter 1, it's more poetic. Genesis chapter 2, it's more of a story. God plants a garden. I just love that imagery. I wish we could camp out there and we could preach on that for about an hour. But he creates a garden. I just love the imagery of God planting a garden. And then he puts man in the garden. And the idea, there's multiple layers that we can understand from this about your nature and my nature. But one thing we can is that God is interested in our flourishing. He's interested in our thriving. It's part of his goal. And he creates spaces where we can find purpose. Work is not a result of the fall of Adam and Eve. Work was designed before the fall, that we find purpose in working and in building things, in stewarding the gifts that God's given us. So Adam had purpose. He had work. He also had unbroken fellowship with God. There's the implication that he would even go on walks with God. So there's this communion with the Lord, like he knows his maker and his maker knows him. And Adam also doesn't have a past of hang-ups and hurts and trauma. But God looks into that situation and he makes an interesting comment. Look at this in Genesis 2. We're going to read verse 15 and 18. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. And you realize that this verse in Genesis 2, we have not got to sin yet, but God is already solving problems. And the first problem that God solves in the Bible is not sin, it's isolation. That you can, here's the message for you and I, you can be in a place that's perfectly primed for your calling and your purpose and your gifts. You can have unbroken fellowship with God. There can be no distance between you and him. And God will still look at you and recognize you have needs that aren't being met. Can I just say something that's bold that I don't mean for it to be controversial, but this chapter implies for you and I, you cannot have all of your needs met by God. It's quiet. God will meet all of your needs. He will make sure you have what you need to have your needs met. But he doesn't intend for every need to be met directly from him to you. Why? Because it's not good for man to be alone, God said. God has divinely designed you to have needs met, to have needs that can only be met by other people. Now, not only does this hit us theologically, but one of the reasons we're kind of rocked or even offended by that is because our hyper-individualistic culture in the West, this is the secular culture around us, teaches us that the ultimate goal in life is to be completely self-sufficient. We even have everyday casual words we use for people who aren't. Oh, they're just so needy. No one wants to be the needy friend, right? They're just so needy. If you said that to God, God would be like, yeah, I made him that way. And there's, of course, there's an unhealthy level of need that we can foster in our lives, right? Of codependence. That's not what I'm talking about. Adam did not have those. I'm talking about legitimate needs inside of our lives that God created. We are in the West, because of our idolization of the individual, of the self, we've even disconnected the need to have others tell me what is true, what's always been true. And so we say things like, well, you just need to find your own truth, right? I mean, it's you do you, I'll do me, the world will get on fine. Until you doing you disrupts me doing me. Then we discover the world won't be fine. Until we also realize that me doing me is sometimes working against the grain of reality itself. And when I start to work against the grain of reality itself, I start to find myself not producing fruit. Because it's like trying to use a car, your car, to move earth around. Driving it to a construction site and start trying to, like a bulldozer. It's going to break down soon. Why? Because that's not the way it was designed. You're working against the grain of its initial design. This is one of the most compelling things about the Christian faith, is it's not just how to treat your neighbor. It's also giving you a revelation of something far more transcendent than that. Here is the very fabric of reality, and here's how you line yourself up with that fabric, to work with it instead of against it. And ultimately, sin is the breaking, it is the resistance of the fabric of God's design and choosing to follow my design instead. So we're in what many cultural commentators say, and sociologists, a loneliness epidemic. Do you know that a few years ago in the UK, we appointed our first minister for loneliness? It is now a government office, minister for loneliness. Of course, something that exaggerated all this was the pandemic. Do you remember that, or have you blocked it out? Of course, it saw unusual levels of isolation. All the bad social statistics were on the rise. So drug overdoses, they were a double-digit rise every month. Suicide rates were up. Domestic abuse was up. But do you know the fascinating reality is that since the pandemic has been dealt with, since lockdown has lifted, the numbers have not significantly fallen. We're in a loneliness epidemic. And loneliness is not just about your own personal, mental, or emotional health. It's far more, its effects are far more pervasive than that. Loneliness is likely to increase your risk of death by 26%. Holt and Lundstedt found in their research. They also found that living alone and with poor social connections is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness is worse for you than obesity. Loneliness and social isolation are associated with an increased risk of developing coronary heart disease and stroke. And in my own birth nation, I would wonder if in Europe the numbers are perhaps worse than this. 40% of all Americans say they are close to no one. We're in a loneliness epidemic. So the first revelation that we have got to understand is you were created to need others. It's not a byproduct of some trauma from your past. It's not because you were laid on your side instead of your back in the crib as a baby. It's not because of whatever. You were created to need others. There is an input in your life that can only be served through other people. And, I used to think, this is one of the things I used to tell people all the time at Ramp Church when they would come into our community. It's really important. You need to, just find community someplace. I would teach that, and I realized recently that's actually not true. That isn't the case. You don't actually find community. You form it. Community isn't found, it's formed. It's not like there's a perfectly suited community for you and you just slot in. Community is more like clay. You form it. This would be like thinking there's a perfectly suited marriage for me and I just slot in. If you've ever been married, you know there's nothing farther from the truth. And let's just say there was a perfectly formed community. If that was a thing, as soon as I got in it, it would all of a sudden be imperfect. And it would have to form around my imperfections. So community isn't something you find. It's not something you discover. It's something you form. And the beautiful revelation behind that is that means there's room for me, number one. But it also means that it takes time. And so if you have felt weary in the journey of forming community, I want to tell you, you're probably on the right path. Because the fact that you're still in it and feeling weary is a sign you are forming something. You are doing the hard work of forming my life around others and forming others' lives around me. And that process is going to be hard. I've actually found a really wild kind of return on investment in the lives of relationships. If you don't give a lot, you don't really get anything. And if you're a naturally ROI thinker, like I am, I don't know, maybe entrepreneurs are often like that, or high-performing leaders, or, and you're like, man, the last thing I wanted to hear when I came to church today was like a mushy-gushy talk on relationships. The truth is, if you're hardwired for it and you don't get it, there will be some sort of destructive habits in your life to try to deal with that. The second thing is there's actually a lot of research that proves that the higher EQ we have, the more successful we'll be in business. But the other thing is, I want to say, when you give enough for relationships, the return on investment is massive. But it feels like a long time before we get to enough. And one of my goals today is to sign you up for that journey. So you don't find community, you form it. So today we're talking about 5 relationships you need to thrive. And we have this tendency to idealize these things. So I don't want you to leave feeling like, oh man, I've got to have this ideal or I will never make it in life. I don't want you to do that. I actually find that pursuing this vision is where the magic is. I've had moments in my life where maybe just short seasons where I'm like, yes, all these 5 are clicking, and then I leave it. But it's in the pursuit of this vision, not in achieving it, that you will find the fruit that you and I are wired to create. So you ready for the first relationship that's going to lead to your thriving and flourishing? You ready? There are 5 C's, because when any sermon points start with the same letter, it's more powerful. So the first C is this: coaches. Coaches. You need mentors in your life. You need people who have been down the road that you've yet to go down. You need the expertise. Last community season, Stacy and I led a group of some young adults who are mentoring young people in our community. So we were mentoring them as they were mentoring some of our youth. And for one of the sessions, we had Tim and Jackie Nelson come and speak. Anybody love Tim and Jackie? Come on, they're right over here. So they spoke on marriage. Have anybody been through a pre-marriage thing with Tim and Jackie around there? Yeah, I see hands. Come on, yes. What a gift to our body. And they were speaking on marriage, and it was amazing to hear the wisdom that is now their everyday life. Maybe it's profound. Maybe you guys are working hard to come up with those principles. But they're just sharing about their everyday life, and all of us in our community, our minds are just being blown. Like, oh my days, this is next level. And why? They're just sharing about their journey somewhere down the road. I remember early on in our marriage, we lived in Alabama, and in Alabama, they have big lawns. So everybody has, it doesn't matter the size of your house, almost everybody has a big lawn. There's a lot of grass. And I seem to be more in love with work than I was anything else in my life. So our grass started growing a bit tall to the point that it's difficult to walk from the car to the door because you feel like you're walking through tall grass. And a mentor in my life had gotten a little clue from my wife that maybe I needed a conversation. And sat me down and just basically said, do you realize you're married now? You know what that means? That means you can't stay at the office till 3 a.m. And I had some pretty bad work habits at that point. Sometimes I would stay all night at the office, and I would sleep, for a couple hours on the sofa in my office and just wake up and work some more. And all the while, my grass is continuing to grow in my lawn. So I had a coach in my life, a mentor, a father, whatever you want to call them, who sat me down. It wasn't my biological father. For some of you, it is. A parent sat me down and said, hey, this is not okay. You can't treat your wife this way. You made the decision to make her a priority in your life, not working. And so now in my life, there is not a month of my life that goes by where I'm not in a setting where I'm talking to someone who's been down the road further than me. And I am intentionally cultivating these relationships. And the benefit's amazing. Without others, it's impossible, I've discovered, for you to understand a few things. Number one, it's impossible for you to understand your problems. You're like, no, you don't understand. I know my problems. They wake me up at 3 a.m. But often we're distracted. It's the old adage, you're missing the forest for the trees. You see the fruit of your problems, but you may not have insight to where it's actually coming from. And coaches often have an insight because they have their own story when they let the grass grow too long. Number two, you also have trouble understanding your own potential. I have rarely found people who see their potential rightly. Most of us are too insecure about our own potential. We can't see actually what our potential is. You need other people to point it out and call you into it. And they point out things that they really think you could do that you're not currently doing. But the third one is your progress. Your problems, your potential, and your progress. People have struggles seeing their own progress. They feel like every year is the same and I'm not progressing at all. And you need the help of others to see, no, you are growing in that. You are different than you were. So coaches are skilled in forging a relational connection with you. They need to be relational people. They can maybe help you set goals. It doesn't have to be something you write down and publish on your blog, but they help you set some sort of vision for your future. They help create a path or a map for how you're going to get there. They provide challenging questions in your life. They help see what's beneath your problems. They provide accountability, not just for your issues, but for your dreams. And they help you see your progress. So what are you looking for when you're looking for someone who's been down the road a bit longer than you? First of all, there's some sort of expertise. And it doesn't mean they have to have a PhD in the topic, but they're further down the road in something you're interested in finding out. And notice I didn't say they have a platform or visibility. I think we prioritize platforms and visibility. And maybe it takes out some of the guesswork. Like if someone's already has a platform in this, I'm pretty sure that they have the expertise I need. But don't try to shortcut it. It could be the person on the row next to you. And you just don't know their life enough to know what expertise they could bring into your life, what wisdom they could bring into your life. But I've met with coaches in my life, people who are further down the road in anything from ministry or work things to marriage to personal growth and productivity. And they're all, every part of your life can benefit from a relationship. They also don't need to be charismatic. So charisma helps you lead a room with a lot of people in it, but it doesn't have anything to do with being a good coach. Okay? They could be boring or even grumpy. And they could be an excellent coach in your life. They also need to know how to turn their expertise into coaching for you. The next thing is they need to have a heart for your thing, whatever it is. They need to be turned toward you. This is essential because sometimes the best thing for your personal growth is not actually to go after your thing, but it's to be connected to somebody else's thing. And if you think they have an agenda in getting you connected to their thing, then you won't trust that advice. But if you know they're turned towards you, then when they say, no, you don't need to pursue your own thing, you need to be connected to this thing, then you know it's for your own well-being because they're turned towards you. So here's some questions for you in this essential relationship for your thriving. Number one, who are you receiving correction from? Who are you receiving correction from in your life? Now, some of you, like I said, you're blessed. These are your biological parents. Many of you know my story. My family tree has many, many branches. I'll just say it that way. There's 5 marriages between my 2 parents. It's an interesting story, my family of origin. But and they have provided incredible guidance for me in some ways. But in other ways, God sent me those voices into my life that I need. But I am regularly pursuing voices to help coach me in certain areas. In fact, I met with somebody this week. It was only my second meeting with them. And when I was on my way to the meeting, I was going, you know what? I don't even know what it is that I'm needing. I almost called Stacy because she's really good at this and went, what questions do I need to ask them? But I went with a conviction knowing I am sowing in a relationship that I don't need because I know there will be a day when I need it. And the problem is we get in crisis moments and we haven't formed relationships with people down the road. And then we need relationships with people down the road and they're not there because I've not cultivated it. So what I'm doing right now, I'm in a season with this particular leader who happens to be another pastor in Manchester, who I'm just trying to cultivate relationship. Just sitting down and sharing my life, opening up my life, hearing about their story, asking about their story. They're a bit further down the road than I am. Do you know the highest performing people in our culture? They have more coaches, not less. Ronaldo will have more coaches than a League One football player, not less. It doesn't mean he's less gifted. So there is this mentality change where we've got to go, now the fact that I need this investment is not a sign that I'm weak. It's a sign that I'm built to have people pour into me. What area of your life, this is the next question. What area, or is there an area of your life you're working on right now because of feedback from somebody else? Is there an area in your life you're working on because someone else has given you feedback? If you're not, I'm not shaming you. I'm inviting you into seeking who are these people. You don't have to submit your whole life and make a blood covenant on okay? This doesn't have to get weird. If you see someone in your church family who seems to be doing really well with their finances and you need help with your finances, schedule a coffee date. I had a young adult come up to me a few weeks ago after service and they said, hey, I really feel like the Lord is stirring in my heart. And I know, of course, you're really well connected in the church. And I was just curious. I feel like the Lord may want to start businesses in my life. I just feel this entrepreneurial drive in me. It was a young lady. She said, do you know anybody? I said, I have 2 people in my mind right now. I will introduce them to you right now. So we literally, and funny enough, they were about 20 feet away from us. So we turned sideways and walked, and Allison and Tanya were standing there, and I said, can I introduce you to somebody? She literally just told me that this is what she feels in her life, and I want her to connect to some people a bit further down the road who can coach her and advise her in that. That's how close your coach is. They may not have 500,000 Instagram followers, but that's how close your coach is. I've met with a pastor before to ask their advice, and they said to me clearly, there's no way I could lead a church the size that your church is. They said, I just don't have the organizational strength or ability. I'm just not geared that way. I didn't go, well, sorry, this meeting's over. But he recognizes the wealth of wisdom and knowledge he could bring to our situation. Do you see what I mean? So don't dishonor what they have because of what they don't have. If you honor people for what they have in your life without dishonoring them for what they don't have, God will continue to bring more coaches into your life. Honor is the doorway. So number one, the first essential relationship you need in your life to thrive is a coach. The second one are comrades. Comrades. This is about building your life team. And a life team is composed of those individuals who know all about you and they can handle it. And the icing on the cake would be they still like you. They're not coaches because coaches are people who their role in your life is for your growth. Comrades is a mutual growth process. They can handle you and they're committed to your growth and you're committed to their growth. I love in John 15, we see Jesus recognizing his own need. Oh man, I'm really rocking you today theologically. Aren't you? You're like, Jesus didn't have any needs. Look at this. I don't call you servants anymore because a servant doesn't know what his master's doing. I've called you friends because I've made known to you everything I've heard from my Father. See, the priority of these relationships is greater fruitfulness in your life, not just success, but personal and relational health, growth, and flourishing. These are your close friends. These are the ones you do life with. And they will probably be close friends for years and years and years. And some of you are already getting depressed. You're like, I feel so overwhelmed by this. It's the process, it's the journey to get there. And to form lifelong friendships takes lifelong journeying. You've got to go through some stuff together. And sometimes you don't actually learn, are they the ones? You may get on well, you may be close, you may enjoy the same things, but you actually don't know if they're friends until you go through something. That's how you know. What do? They provide security, a sense of safety for you to be real and reveal who you really are. They give you structure and a sense of self-discipline to help you from losing yourself in your impulses and distractions. They help you find your voice, your courage, your personal boundaries when you've lost yourself in compliance or passivity or people-pleasing. They acknowledge your shadow, your dark sides, your failures, instead of ignoring it or allowing you to withdraw or shaming you. They help you be kind to yourself instead of harsh. They help you accept your flaws instead of hiding in entitlement or narcissism. They give you confidence in your God-given gifts and talents. They help you find your life's mission and your vision. I recommend that this is somewhere between 3 and 10 people. There's no way you can be more than that. And if it's less, you probably aren't getting enough from them. So qualities, there needs to be shared core values, engagement in your growth, and there needs to be a stance for. The key for these types of relationships, I don't have time to dive in. We can teach a whole message on this, on friendship. Would you like that? Should we do that someday? Our vulnerability. You're like, not anymore. Actually, don't teach on that. These are people you share your mistakes, struggles, weaknesses, needs, emotions. There needs to be truthfulness in this relationship. This is not the time to posture. If anything, you should color it worse. If anything, you should paint it worse than it really is. That's these relationships. And the safety in these relationships is not that they are pain-free. It's that there's a commitment that's bigger than the pain. What makes my relationship with Stacy safe is not that we never hurt each other. What I have discovered is the people who you are closest to, you get hurt the worst by. What makes it safe is that it's not that I never get hurt, is that when I do dumb things to Stacy, she doesn't hit the road. I'm not advocating abuse, okay? This is not about staying in an abusive situation at all. This is about people who are mutually committed to the benefit of the other, and along the way, our humanity and our weaknesses hurt the other person. What makes that safe is commitment. It's covenant. I've heard it said before, if there was more confession of temptation, there would be less confession of sin. That's what these relationships are for. That's what these relationships are for. Comrades. Number 3, casuals. So you have coaches, you have comrades, you have casuals. This is about making great acquaintances. Every day we encounter people of all sorts in our social lives. Our neighborhoods, work connections, sports events, church. And these are simply people we would call friends or acquaintances. We have lunch with them, see them at parties. They're also an important part of having the right kind of life. Your comrades, your life team, are your deepest commitments. But friendships are known by research to be part of longevity, health, and your general happiness. These are low commitment, enjoyable relationships. For many of you, your communities are this in Ramp Church. And from that community, you can find lifers. But that community are about real great acquaintances. And what are these casuals for? They allow you to live in the present, because life is found, flourishing is found in today, not in yesterday, not in the future, but today. And they root you in the present. They bring a sense of diversity into your life. Look around Ramp Church. There's probably many, if not most of the people in this room, you wouldn't be in a room with if you weren't at Ramp Church right now. There's no career connection. There's no common interests. This is the beautiful thing about the body of Christ. And that kind of diversity, whereas your friends are connected based on core values, there needs to be a core part of who you are that connects with them. This is varied values, varied doctrines even, and beliefs, even about who God is. It enriches your life. They help us to be here and now in the present. Our souls are enriched, our worldviews deepened, and our minds stretched by diversity. Varied values, faiths, perspectives, political stances, preferences, cultures, and interest. I think about, in my life, I have a couple neighbors who I meet regularly with, and just out in our front garden. And we talk about many things. One time I was meeting with one of my neighbors called Sully. He's a taxi driver, and we were talking out on in my front garden, and I saw him continue looking over my shoulder. And he drove around, and I turned around, and I realized his cat is inside my living room. in the front window looking out. I'm like, okay, thank you, Sully. But Sully's a Muslim, and a few years ago when I went to Israel, I told him I was going to Tel Aviv. And I just loved the conversation then. Oh, you're going to, so Christians in Israel, that's a big thing. I was like, yeah, that's a big thing. So a Christian pastor and a committed Orthodox Muslim have a conversation about Israel in my front garden. Isn't that beautiful? Why? Because there's a picture of redemption even in that. Don't watch the news headlines. Make friends and acquaintances with Sully down the road, okay? Number 3, casuals. Number 4, colleagues. You were wired to work productively and collaborate. You're hardwired to move something forward in your life. It's essential to who you are. I met recently with a retired pastor who's in his 70s. He's moved on from leading a church now into other types of things. And he started telling me how, I started asking him about, how do you prepare to be retired? I'm 42, guys. Don't worry, it's not soon. But there will come a day where my leadership will be more of a hindrance in Ramp Church than a help. And so I'm preparing for that day already. I'm asking, how do we get prepared as a church? How do I get prepared personally for the day when the next generation of leadership is meant to take over? So I'm picking his brain on this. You need to tell me, you're in your 70s, you've moved on. And one of the things he said was, he started talking about having purpose. You need to have purpose beyond your church. especially someone who's led or pioneered something, you've got to find purpose elsewhere. And he said, I've started to build a team because I miss being in a team. And the team are people who are passionate about changing Manchester. I was like, okay, amazing. You taking any new members? I've started building a team because I want that team in my life to be able to collaborate. The biggest thing I missed when I stepped out of church leadership is a team. What is he doing? He's getting intentional that my work colleagues matter. And even though we're not paid by the same organization, I'm going to form that around my life to have a common purpose. And number 5, caring. You need to provide for others. You need to have relationships in your life with people who have legitimate needs for something that you can provide. They have no avenue to recompense you financially or otherwise. Your care for them is the primary focus of your relationship. And they take responsibility for the care they've given. So they are moving forward with that care. Stacy and I are actively look for ways in our lives to serve in places outside of Ramp Church. Because if I serve more in Ramp Church, that's just called working more. Because this is my job. But I want to serve in a place where I'm receiving no reward from that. It is purely advancing other people's lives. And that's why I want you to do the same thing. You serving in Ramp Church has more to do with your discipleship than our needs. If you can connect those dots, things start to move in your life. What happens? The soil of your life starts to change. Where you're planted starts to change. I want to show you a video. Can I show you a video? One of the things I love about being a part of a ministry, a church that's in multiple nations is part of our faith family can be working in another nation and producing fruit while we're asleep. And it's all part of the story God's writing through the Ramp. And so the Ramp in the U.S. had a conference this past weekend, and they posted a testimony. Maybe you've seen it. I wanted to show it today because it points to the beautiful way that God speaks to us through others. So here you go, watch.
About 7 months ago in March, I got myself into a pickle. I was in California. I was just really involved in some dark things, and I was contemplating suicide. And I got to the point where I was walking out of the door to go crash my car. I had a whole plan and everything. And my friend Emma, she is on Chosen. She's here. She sent me a prayer audio message at the exact moment that I was walking out of the house. At the time, I really hated God. I cry out to him, I feel nothing. And so after that moment happened, I was like, all right, God, I think you see me. One person sees me. And so I was like, all right, God, I give this to you. I value you. I will never take my life. And the Chosen prayer group, they didn't know who I was or anything. They just knew me from my friend, and they decided to pray over me. And I just listened to her audio. She recorded it. Everything they were praying for thousands and thousands of miles away, not even knowing me, was exactly what I was going through at that moment. I know there's a whole stigma on mental health, and I know there's the suicidal thoughts and ideations is rampant right now. I have no doubt that there's probably some of you guys that have been abused, that have been through traumas, that have, broken families, that have contemplated suicide. And if you're here, you're supported and you're seen and you're understood. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to them for interceding for me. I'm so grateful for people that care and reminded, hey, God sees you. Hey, we see you. Hey, we support you. And I remember God telling me and putting it on my heart, like, hey, when you said I value, like, I'll never take my life. He said, I'll restore your life and let you see the lives of others be restored too. I want to say thank you to you guys. But mostly I want to say thank you to Jesus, because he's in the grave. My whole life has been washed away. Now all I see.
Isn't that amazing? Give God praise. Wherever you're at today, you're seen. you're known, your story is real to God. And God's not just inviting us into right belief. He's inviting us into genuine belonging.